Shalom to everybody. It is Thursday, March 12th. This is our continuing deep dive into the book of Bemidbar. And it's great to be with you today. I'm just returned last night from a 4-day Torah immersion at Hadar Yeshiva in New York, which is something I do every winter. And and it was really just fabulous and wonderful. And personally, it's about recharging spiritual batteries. And I am coming back to you very charged up. And there was, over the course of the 4 days, there's this wide array of topics and programs and classes that I attend. Um, and it's full day immersion. It starts at 7:30 in the morning. It goes to 9:30 at night, all day long. It's not sort of like one of these country club sort of conferences that we've all been to professionally over the years. It's like people who are there really intensively to get down to um, studying good, high level spiritual, intellectual Torah together. There was at least two classes I took over the course of the 4 days that were at least in some way connected to our studies together about the Book of Numbers. And it just kind of made me smile and made me think of all the work that we've done together. We've done 60 classes together for those who've been doing this with me from the beginning about the saga of Bamidbar and this saga of Israel in the wilderness, which has been very special to me. These courses that I took also gave me even another perspective about the work we've been doing, some of which will leak out, if not today, then in future classes that we're going to do together about the significance, the importance about what the Book of Numbers is trying to do. It feels so hodgepodge and kitchen sink in the kinds of material that it is, but there is an agenda to this book, some of which we've touched on in past classes, and some of which I have kind of a new insight on, which we'll do together. It'll come out in appropriate, timely fashion in the weeks ahead. We're in Numbers chapter 27 right now, and it feels like a transition sort of moment. I mean, that's exactly what it is, because in Numbers chapter 27, in the second half of the chapter, it's about Moses knowing that his death is imminent and the preparing his successor. This is really a story about succession. I did not watch that HBO show Succession. I watched like the first couple of episodes of it when people were raving about what a great show it is. I found it personally very depressing. I don't like those kinds of shows where I hate every single character in the show, and it was like one of those. But maybe someone on the call is an aficionado of Succession. This is also a story of succession, lahavdil. Um, and and this is one of the chapters where God reminds Moses that his death is imminent and that it's time to prepare his disciple, Joshua, for inheriting the mantle of leadership. Now, that means you can't read this chapter without kind of, we're going to sympathize with Moses today, I hope. It's also impossible not to sympathize with Joshua. But can you maybe a lot of people have had the experience, maybe you have too, of the feeling of succeeding somebody who is an incredibly successful, incredibly charismatic sort of leader. And that person's leadership's coming to an end. And now everybody turns to you and says, "Huh, you're the new leader. What have you got to show us?" You know? And can you imagine again, it's a very common experience in business or in community leadership or wherever, in all sorts of leadership. That's a common enough experience. The challenge of following an incredibly charismatic leader. Now imagine that charismatic leader is Moses, who's been entitled to these private conversations with God, the lawgiver of Israel, the deliverer of the Torah. Just imagine. Well, the Torah has some interesting things to say about succession of leadership, and what the Torah only implies, the Midrash will spell out in all sorts of interesting ways. So let's go back to Numbers chapter 27, and we can start with verse 12, which is the passage we did last time. I don't want to reiterate what we did last time, but maybe by rereading the passage, it'll give us a running start to the section I want us to talk about today. So I'll put it up on the screen momentarily. We're in Numbers chapter 27, beginning with verse 12, the second half of this chapter. And all I need before I put it up is a volunteer who'd like to read this out loud in English for us. Um, who's going to be our volunteer today? Gershom, was that a wave? All right.
Yeah, nobody else went, so I'll
Okay,
go.
we'd like to hear from you. That's good. Here comes Numbers chapter 27. You should be able to see that on the screen right now.
Mhm.
And um, try to put ourselves, as we're hearing God give these instructions to Moses, let's try to imagine how Moses feels hearing these words. And then let's imagine how Joshua feels. And also let's pay close attention to how accurately does Moses fulfill God's instructions in this passage? That'll give us something to talk about, I'm sure. Okay, Gershom, take it away.
12.
Yeah, it,
Okay.
can you see it on the screen? Can I,
Yeah, I'm gonna
okay.
read
I
from my
mean, you can
book
read it
though.
from wherever. I'm asking everybody else. It's on the screen, yes?
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
The Lord said to Moses, "Ascend these heights of Abarim and view the land that I have given to the Israelite people. When you have seen it, you too shall be gathered to your kin, just as your brother Aaron was. For in the wilderness of Zin, when the community was contentious, you disobeyed my command to uphold my sanctity in their sight by means of the water. Those are the waters of Meribat Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin." Uh, I didn't catch how far I should go.
No, I'm going to ask you to read the whole chapter, but
Okay.
keep
Keep
going. I'm going to interrupt you at the end of the next paragraph, though.
Okay, no problem. Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, "Let the Lord, source of the breath of all flesh, appoint someone over the community, who shall go out before them and come in before them, and who shall take them out and bring them in, so that the Lord's community may not be like sheep that have no shepherd."
Okay, up until that point, that's what we did last time. Okay, that God has said to Moses, listen, you know, you already knew way back at the time when you struck the rock in chapter 20 of this book, when you struck that you've already known that you're going to die in this wilderness with the wilderness generation, no, with the slavery generation. Um, but before you die in the wilderness and the next generation goes into the promised land, I'll let you go up to the mountain and survey from that height the entire promised land. Um, uh, okay, so that's what we discussed last time. Ascend these heights, go and view the land. When you've seen it, you're going to be gathered to your kin just like Aaron was, and reminder of that complex story of when he struck the rock. Okay, now Moses' response. This is new for this week. So, okay, Gershom, take us from verse 15 now to the end of the chapter. I'm sorry, verse 18
18.
to the end
Okay,
of the chapter.
got it. And the Lord answered Moses, "Single out Joshua, son of Nun, an inspired man, and lay your hand upon him. Have him stand before Eleazar the priest and before the whole community, and commission him in their sight. Invest him with some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community may obey. But he shall present himself to Eleazar the priest, who shall on his behalf seek the decision of the Urim before the Lord. By such instruction they shall go out, and by such instruction they shall come in, he and all the Israelites, the whole community." Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before Eleazar the priest and before the whole community. He laid his hands upon him and commissioned him, as the Lord had spoken through Moses.
Okay, great. Thank you. So
Sure.
this is about investing leadership in the next generation, in the succeeding leader, Joshua. And and God gives Moses some pretty Susan, put your head down for a minute. I'm not ready yet. Um, that God gives Moses some pretty specific instructions. And one of the things that we're going to want to unpack in this conversation that we're going to want to pay attention is to what extent did Moses accurately fulfill God's instructions here? Because there's some subtle things. There's some subtle passages that are obvious in the English, and one or two things in the Hebrew that are really rather quite fascinating. Now, before we get to that point, I think there's one or two interesting things that we should unpack as we look at it verse by verse, but then we're going to get to that big question. As I do that, I'm going to take it down for a second just because I'll share with you the source sheet that I put together that's got some really fascinating things on it. But we're not quite ready to get to the source sheet just yet because there's a few interesting things. There's a link to the source sheet in the chat for all of you. But before we get to any of that material, let's just take a look at a few of these verses again. So at the beginning, Gershom read to us, and God said to Moses, "Single out Joshua, let's say, Kachlahat Yoshua bin Nun, take for yourself Joshua bin Nun, Ish Asher Ruach Bo," which is a lot of Hebrew words, four Hebrew words that are translated in English as an inspired man. Ish Asher Ruach Bo, a man who has Ruach in him. We'll talk about what that phrase means. And Samachta et Yadcha alav, and then put your hand upon him. Okay. Um, uh, it's an interesting phrase that he has Ruach in him. It's not from a plain reading, crystal clear exactly what that means. Jacob Milgram suggests at least two things about what that might mean. One is that he's been endowed with a special skill. Doesn't say exactly what that skill is, but with the other times when this phrase has appeared, it's appeared at least in two other occasions in the Torah that somebody has ruach in them. One is Joseph. Joseph in Egypt is described as a man who has ruach in him. Specifically, he has the skill of dream interpretation. He has that particular skill. The other person, remember the other person who has this description, rather famously? A man named Bitzalel.
Hello. Oh,
Yeah, you got it. But Salil in the wilderness is the person who's the architect of the Mishkan, the tabernacle that Israel schleps through the wilderness with them. Um, that he seems to be the building contractor who's got those very specific skills about how to take the description from God and to put it all together so that this marvelous thing goes from blueprint to actual physical reality. And he's described as someone with a sher ruach bo. He's got this spirit in him, like this God-given skill, as it were. The problem with this is it doesn't tell us exactly what Joshua's skill is, but it would seem that he's got some special skill set that endows him with leadership and the ability to succeed Moses. Dr. Milgram suggests that maybe there's another way of understanding Asher Ruach Bo. Ruach in later Hebrew means spirit, and maybe it could mean courage also. Joshua's main thing that he's done two main things so far. He's led the Israelites in battle against their enemies, against the Amalekites. So maybe he showed great courage and bravery as a military leader, and that enables him to be a leader here. The other thing he most famously did was he stood up when all the he and Caleb were the two scouts who said, "Don't listen to the other 10." The other 10 said, "I will never inherit the promised land." And that story has cast a shadow over almost all of Numbers that we've been talking about since then. But he was the one who said, "Don't listen to them. We can do this." Um, and that and that God is with us. So maybe this Asher Ruach Bo means he's shown special courage, bravery or integrity when everybody else was turning away. He had the courage and bravery and integrity to go against the grain. It could mean that also. Anybody have any other sense about Joshua, a man who has ruach in him, and somehow that in qualifies him to be Moses' successor? That's the best I can do with it. Anybody have another sense of what that might mean? Yeah, Judy. Except we can't hear you.
Sorry. Um, the one additional piece for me, although I'm sure it was understood in what you were saying, Neil, is that sense of spirit. There's a connection to God that maybe Joshua has that the other spies didn't have. I guess it goes along with his courage and his faith, but I would just add that.
Great, thank you. Renata.
I pretty much want to say what you did. I think no, Joshua was the one who understands God like Noah understood God. Whatever God transmit to Noah, he's able to transmit to Joshua. Joshua is able to read God. I don't know however to put it, the way Moses could read God. So that's my take on that.
Well, that's interesting because that hasn't happened yet, but that will happen in the future. So, I mean, I think you're on good ground there, but in that sense, it's new information. God is sort of saying, I'll speak to Joshua too, just like I've spoken to you. But up until this point in the story, God hasn't done that.
No, but
But
it says Joshua has Ruah, which
But
is
certainly a big theme of the opening chapters of the book of Joshua is, wow, miracles and wonders happen to our ancestors, happen to our parents. Can they happen for us too? And the big theme of the opening chapters of Joshua are yes, they can, and that God speaks to Joshua as God spoke to Moses. So yeah, Renata, I think you're on good ground there. But the fascinating thing about your comment is yes, but in the future, not yet. So I
well,
like
God
that better.
knows that. God, it may be our future, but God still knows that.
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
there's
sure.
no past and future to God. God knows the whole thing.
Of course, of course. And Susan.
What I noticed was God tells Moses to talk to Joshua. God doesn't bother to talk to Joshua or warn him or say, I've chosen you. You're
Oh,
some.
yeah, right.
It's just he's supposed to accept this. And um, now we know that Moses was married, had two sons who sort of disappear. We never hear about Joshua's family. We know his father's name, and that's it. Um,
Oh yeah, he's over. I was thinking about that too. Over and over, he's called by his father's name. He's Yoshua bin Nun over and over again. But who the hell is Nun? Nun's never mentioned anywhere in his own context, in his own right. It's so interesting that he's invoked by his full name. I never counted, but dozens and dozens of times throughout the Torah. But who the hell is Nun? What kind of
and,
name is that?
and
Doesn't even sound like a Jewish name.
And he probably he no children or wives are described. He doesn't seem to have gotten married, so maybe he's almost a
That's
better.
true. That's true. There's Midrash. You know the Midrash, Susan, about who he marries?
I think he marries. Well, he should have married Rahav, is what I think.
That's the Midrash.
But
You got
yes,
it. There's a Midrash that he marries Rahav the harlot in the opening chapters of Joshua. But of course, that's not in the Tanakh. That's the
I I think
imaginations of the
I
rabbis.
think they didn't, and that it's more of a Henry James Beast in the Jungle, where it's too
Great.
late. And the other thing I wanted to ask about is, Moses says to God, yeah, you should appoint a leader so that the people won't be like sheep without a shepherd. Um, Maybe because I was just discussing this in another class an hour ago that we always say Moses was such a humble man, but he seems this is not what I would call humility. You know, oh, everybody had me, and when I'm gone, you're going to need someone else. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure what to do with that.
Um, I'm not sure that it's immodest, but that I mean, I think you can still defend Moses' integrity by saying, what's his first concern? God says to him, go up to the mountain, you're going to die, and Joshua will take over. And Moses' first concern is, but what about the people? Who's going to take care of them? I mean, in a certain way, that's very much in keeping with Moses' integrity as a leader. His first concern is, oh God, I don't want to die on the mountain. Oh God, please let me live. Please let me go into the. I mean, I know we said in the Midrash they imagine him negotiating with God, but in the Torah text, his first concern is, but what about the people? And that's a and that's a real leader. So, um, but I wanted so thank you for bringing up that point. But I'm building towards this other question I want to ask you. Let's just go back to the text here. Verse 19, have him stand. Oh, along these lines, Susan, have him stand before Eleazar the priest and before the whole community and commission him in their sight. Well, um, at first, when I looked at this in preparation for this class, the phrase, didn't particularly jump out at me. I'm looking at this phrase before the whole community, Lifnei kol ha'edah. And I was like, okay, I'm not sure what the significance of that is. Make sure that this investing Joshua with this authority, at first it didn't leap out at me. And then I'm like, then I was looking closely at it and hearing Gershom read this section out loud. In four verses, 19, 20, 21, and 22, this phrase appears four times. Lifnei kol ha'edah. And unlike me, that the Torah doesn't repeat itself. If it says one thing, it says something once. That our tradition of how we read Torah is if there's a repetition, it must be there for a reason. And then I started seeing before the whole community, so that the whole Israelite community um, uh, he shall present himself to the by such instruction. The whole community. Moses did as God commanded him. He took Joshua and had him stand before the whole community. Lifnei kol ha'edah appears four times in four verses. There's something so important in this passage about the fact that this whole process takes place publicly with the acknowledgement and full, complete awareness of the entire people. It wouldn't say it four times in four verses if there wasn't something incredibly significant about that. And I'm not 100% sure. I would ask you, what's so important about this procedure taking place lifnei kol ha'edah, before the entire community, that everybody should see it and know it and understand it? Maybe it has to do, I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with legitimacy, right? Then maybe this is my initial question that I asked you a few minutes ago. If you can imagine what it would be like to be Joshua, to say, um, yeah, you get to succeed Moses, the one who went up onto the mountain, the one who stood before Pharaoh, the one who stood at the Red Sea when the sea split, the one who led Israel for 40 years through the wilderness. Okay, but he's retiring now and you're the successor. Good luck. If you've ever had the experience of succeeding a charismatic leader, well, you have one, thousandth of a sense of how intimidated Joshua must have been to step into those shoes. And yet, here in four verses, we have in the sight of the whole community, seems to imply, in my mind at least, something about helping Joshua achieve the legitimacy that he needs to be successful, both in the eyes of the people and perhaps in his own mind as well. How am I doing with that? Am I onto something here, or am I out in left field? Ronnie, what do you think?
I'm thinking that it's to avoid any rebellion by any faction in the community that may think
Okay.
otherwise.
So, yeah, so that he's a legitimate leader To them, no rebellions. And these people, as we've discovered in the book of Numbers, are prone to rebellions on occasion, right?
Right.
So seems like a good consideration and appropriate. Cheryl?
Hi, Neil. Good to be here.
Hi.
Um, I agree with you about the legitimacy, and it made me think not only about the importance of Moses, like actually just laying his hand on him and showing before everyone, like, I approve of this succession plan.
Mm.
But it also made me think about like the ulterior motive of God's telling Moses he couldn't go along anymore because, as you said, if any of us have ever seen like a succession after a charismatic leader, it can go awry. And it's very interesting that Joshua doesn't actually have to deal with Moses's presence when he takes over leadership.
There's there's an old cliche in the synagogue world, and as you know, I'm a little removed from the synagogue world. There's an old cliche in the synagogue world that when a senior rabbi who's been there for a generation retires, there's a classic gift that the congregation tends to give that rabbi upon the retirement. You know what that is, Cheryl?
Yeah.
The vacation trip around the world. In other words, you can get out of our hair and out of the hair of your successor for 6 months or a year. That your gift is take 6 months and go travel the world, Rabbi. You've been great, but also get out of here for a while. No one ever gave me I never got anything. Never mind. Av, go ahead.
So could you put the text back up, please?
Yes, of course. Here it comes.
I have a different question.
Hope it's not too far off topic. Go
It's
ahead.
not off topic, I
Oh,
hope.
okay, good.
It said in English to transfer some of your authority.
Right.
That's what we're getting to next. Yeah,
And
but go ahead. Ask
okay.
your question though.
And my question is, what is the Hebrew?
That's the very next topic we're going to. So just hold tight. Let's hear any other responses to the
Okay.
question about Kol Ha'edah, which appears 4 times in this passage. We'll just wrap that up, and then that's the very next topic. Judy.
I just was noticing at the end of verse 21, and I guess it's poetic, really. Um, we've got both V'kol B'nai Yisrael ito and V'kol Ha'edah.
Yeah,
Just a nice repetition. I don't know if there's any significance to it, but I didn't see that it happened in the previous
you're right. I've
examples.
never noticed it before. I'm not sure what to do with it, but
Yeah.
you're right. It's a little bit more, maybe because that's the no, it's not. It's the third of the 4 appearances. I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with it, but yeah, that's there too. It really
Okay.
emphasizes this point, though.
Yeah.
Susan.
The last time that Joshua was standing before the entire community, which was after the spies came back, they were ready to kill him. Um,
Huh?
and so maybe this is God, I don't know, either warning Joshua and Moses to be careful or assuming that everything's going to be better this time.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a fair comment too. Although, again, I'll remind us, this is 38 years later. The people, the whole community that we're talking about, are the children of those who wanted to kill him, are the children of those who came out of slavery. Um, so maybe I don't,
some
we
might still
we
be
can
alive.
only use our imaginations, and you're so good at Midrash, Susan,
Yeah.
that we use our imaginations. What's the attitude of these people towards Joshua? On one hand, is he the guy who our parents all couldn't stand? Or is their attitude, he's the only one left of that generation? Him, Moses, Caleb, and maybe Serach Bat Asher, but we never see her anyway. That he's still around from that pioneer generation that um, that did all those legendary things. I wonder. in the mental movie you're filming, you can decide for yourself what's the attitude of these people towards Joshua, both before and after Moses lays his hands on him. But just imagine. Keep it to yourself, though. Let's not talk about that right now, but imagine. I'll take Bruce's comment. Renata, if this is okay, I'll take Bruce as the last comment on this one, and then I want to get to one more point that I want to get to. So, Bruce.
Uh, Rabbi Gold, you're onto something. There
Thank
are
you.
four, I'm going to give you, you have to look. There are four Israels. You just have to look to find them.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Moses is a politician. God knows he's a politician. He's got to talk to the Levites separately. Okay.
Uh-huh.
He's got to talk to the Sanhedrin. That term gets started to be used, but it's the whole structure of people who report to him for judges, the judges who've come up below him as the inferior court and up to the higher one. He's got to talk to them separately. Okay. And lest we forget, he's got to talk to the tribal leadership. They're still there. They may have passed around. That's the third Israel. And then a grand appearance before all several 100,000, most of whom won't hear it, but at least will be transmitted to them. It's a PR event. Most won't hear it, but at least they can always go to any one of the other three and say, what did he say again? You know? So there's your four Israels. We
That's a good midrash also. Excellent. I like that interpretation very much.
like that,
Kol Aida, to make
but they
sure all the different
yeah.
elements of the community, all the bases are covered here. Oh, that's very good. Thank you. Thank you. Let me show you. Let's get to Av's point, or to Av's question, because in the next verse, the next instruction after put your hands on Joshua, V'hamad ha'oto lifnei Elazar Okain. No, wait. I think I'm in the wrong verse. Oh no, here it is. Vinatata Av, you with me? Watch this. Vinatata
Yes.
mehodcha alav. Invest him with some of your authority. The Hebrew word for authority here is hod, which is a very interesting word. It's a spiritual word. It's a word that appears in Jewish spiritual writings and in Kabbalah a lot. It's the names of one of the 10 Sefirot in Lurianic Kabbalah. It's hard to translate in the Torah. The JPS translation here says authority, and with good reason. Sometimes it's translated as power or charisma. Give him some of your power. Give him some of your charisma. Robert Alter translates this as grandeur, which is a little bit, well, which is a little bit in keeping again with the Jewish spiritual tradition, because Hod is often brought together with the Hebrew word hadar, Hod and hadar, which are words for radiance, luminescence in a spiritual kind of way. You see why it's hard to translate? So give Joshua some of your Hod. How can one person transfer that to another person? Um, and for that matter, the translation, if you look at it really carefully, mehodcha, the translation is quite good here. Whatever hod is, which they call authority, mehodcha, the translation is good with some of your authority, which is going to get the commentators very excited because it means some, but not all. Let's see what we got on our source sheet here for a second. We're going to go back to that thing at the top in a minute. Um, invest him mehodcha with some of your hod so that the Israelites community may obey. There's some really good midrash on this. Rashi has 3 comments on this phrase. So if Rashi's going to say, I need to say 3 different things about this, you know that it's rich with the opportunity for interpretation here. Rashi's first comment, invest him with some of your hod. He's going to go the literal kind of spiritual kind of route. and say Hod means radiance as opposed to authority. What does that have to do with Moses? Well, if you remember, Moses has a sort of radiance around him. I don't mean that in a symbolic or, kind of elusive sort of way. That No, Moses literally has a radiance. We all know the story. Remember from back in Exodus 34, Moses comes down from Mount Sinai and he's carrying the tablets of the Ten Commandments in his arms, and the text says, Moshe lo yada ki karan or panav, that his face had these rays of light coming out of it. Yes, that's the famous phrase. I know we've talked about this before. I'm sure you've seen this in other Torah contexts before. Karan, or these rays of light, is the ones that like the Vulgate, I think, the Christian Bible translated Karen as horns coming out of Moses' head, like in the famous uh, um, a Rembrandt rendition of Moses with the horns on his head. And then we have a whole conversation about how many people have had times in our lives when someone said, You're Jewish, where are your horns? That's where it came from. But it's a mistranslation of the text that Moses had light coming from him when he came down the mountain. So much so, everybody gets so hung up on that and remembers that because of all the anti-Semitism that comes with it, that they forget the second part of that story. After the Israelites came near, he instructed them concerning all that God had imparted on Mount Sinai. And when Moses finished speaking, he put a veil on his face. Everybody forgets in the mental movies that we're filming in our minds that Moses, half the time when he's speaking to Israel, has a veil over his face to keep the light in because he's got light pouring out of him. So Rashi, who knows all that, and Rashi probably doesn't know Rembrandt, but because he lived a few centuries before, but who knew everything else, Rashi says this is quite literally the Hod is the literal light that was coming off of Moses' face. Give Joshua some of that. Not all of it, but some of it. Okay. If you don't like that one, I'll tell you another one. Here's Rashi, who his second comment on the same verse. Mehodcha, with some of your authority. And he's very interested in velo kol hodcha, some, but not all of it. And then Rashi quotes the Midrash that says, we find here that if Moses' face was like the sun, then Joshua's face was like the moon. I bet we could do a whole hour on that sentence, too. That on one hand, the moon is not as luminous as the sun is, significantly less, right? So uh, that's the relationship between Moses and Joshua, or the thing. But we also know that the moon, an astronomer in the room or a seventh grade astronomer in the room would be quick to say, the moon doesn't have any light at all. The moon just reflects the light that's cast at it. The sun is a source of luminescence. The moon reflects the light of the sun, unless you went out last week and saw the lunar eclipse, which was pretty cool. We saw it here. Anyway, it's an evocative statement that Rashi has. But I think for our purposes today, the most important thing about it is mehodcha means some, but not all. Joshua is not Moses 2. Joshua is Joshua 1, but with some of Moses's characteristics and charisma and spiritual authority. One other thing, and then I'll shut up for a second. Rashi has just one other comment on it. Oh, no, I got two more things to show you. Rashi has another comment, so that the whole Israelite community will obey. It's the second half of the verse. And he says, what does that mean? And maybe Rashi here is saying, what's this whole section about? That they should treat him, Joshua, with the kavod and with the yirah, respect and reverence, the same way they treat you, Moses. That seems like kind of a funny statement because it seems like it's either aspirational or even a little. I wonder how Moses feels when he hears that. He could be like, okay, that's good. That's a good, noble goal. Or he could be like, yeah, because for these last 40 years in the wilderness, I've gotten so much respect and reverence. All they've done is bitch and complain the whole time in the wilderness. And now God says, and they'll give him the same sort of respect and reverence that they gave you, Moses. I don't know what to make of that. But this is all Rashi's putting together. What does it mean to say, give from your hod, give some of it to Joshua? I got one more for you. This is from another commentary, but another great commentator uh, who's known as the Baal Turim, but he's called the Baal Turim because this is Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher, one of the major figures in halacha, in Jewish law, from the 13th and 14th century in Germany and then in Spain. Um, he wrote a very authoritative code of Jewish law called the Tur, or the Arba Turim. The four, a Tur is a column, the four columns. Um, but he also wrote this great Torah commentary. It's a great Torah commentary because it's very whimsical and it's got a lot of gematria in it. Like he plays games with the words and with the numbers and stuff. And he has a great comment here too that's also valuable. Again, the verse is, give Joshua mehodcha, some of your hod, whatever that means. And he's got this wonderful comment that's going to use gematria. I know it comes up all the time, but we've always have like new people coming in and out of our class. Everybody remember what gematria is? Gematria is when you take the Hebrew letters and convert them into numbers, and then the numerical value of that word. If you have two words or phrases that have the same numerical value, they must have some sort of cosmic connection to each other. So look what he does. Mehodcha, if you take the letters and turn them into numbers, in gematria is equivalent to the Hebrew word hasod, the secret. And then I spelled it out for you in a way that he didn't. So mehodcha, mem is 40, hey is 5, vav is 6, dalet is 4, chaf is 20. 40 plus 5 plus 6 plus 4 plus 20 equals 75. And the Hebrew word hasod is also equal in value to 75. What's the significance? That is to say, Moses passed on to Joshua the mystical secrets of Judaism, not just the laws, but the mystical secrets of Kabbalah, which he calls the Merkavah, the secret meanings of Ezekiel's chariot, and Maseh Reshit, the metaphysical mysteries of creation. But those expressions, the Merkavah and Maseh Bereshit, are taken together. They mean Jewish, the secrets of the Jewish mystical tradition. Some of you have been studying that with me last fall and this winter. Um, so the Baal Turim finds a way of saying, Moses didn't just say to Joshua, here's the laws and make sure everybody follows them. But he was also saying, let me tell you the mystical secrets of God that have been revealed to me so that you can reveal them down to your student as well. I think that's a pretty cool comment myself, if you ask me. Um, I'll stop for a second and I'll look at Av in particular and say, Av, you raised the question. What does it mean when it says invest him with some of your authority? Do you have a little more clarity now?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes, is more clear and um, the explanation makes it more clear in terms of the the Hebrew and the English translation.
Okay, I got one more.
And Rashi's good.
I
The
got it.
Rashi's are
I got
good.
another curveball for you. Oh, but Renata, your hand has been up and you've been very patient. Is it up from before? You have another comment to add here?
My comment was about the word some originally. It was hung up on some of your authority, and then you continued
Yeah.
speaking about some of your authority. I was going to ask you about some. Some means
Yeah.
not all. To me, some means not all. So I don't understand what that means.
It's very evocative, right? And I think the translation is the translators know Rashi, and Rashi said some, but not all of your authority. Um, I think that that's because, well, I'm going to make up an answer. You tell me if it's right or if it resonates with you at all. I think the challenge that Joshua has of succeeding Moses, I think this is a way of saying, yeah, in some ways you have to mehodcha. You have to have some of Moses's traits. They have to be able to see a continuity of leadership from Moses to Joshua. But you can't just be a clone of the character of the charismatic leader who became before you. You can't just be Moses too. That Joshua has to be his own man for his time and place. The generation doesn't need Moses too. The generation needs its leader. And I think give him some of your authority means um, give him the tools that he needs for his success, but don't clone yourself because that never works. That's what I think it means. Um,
I
the
think it means some that means give them the tools you need to go forward, not the tools you need to get where you are today. Something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Those
would.
had special skills to get the Israelites from Egypt to where they were today, and where they're going in the future is a whole different process. It's like the
Yeah.
next generation. Next generation needs a new leader.
Yes, right. There's got to be continuity. There can't be, one of the ways leaders fail is if they draw a complete break and say, that was then, this is now, and we've totally broken with the past. That's one way leaders fail. But so some of your authority is necessary so that people need the continuity, can have the continuity. But on the other hand, this is a new time, a new generation, and a new place, and they need a new leader who can speak to that moment. So that's why some, but not all. That's I mean, I think we've beaten that point into the ground a little bit, but I think it's an important one. It's because both of those reasons are why leaders fail over and over again in all sorts of contexts. Ronnie,
I'm interested in the but.
but
Yeah. hmm With
whose
the,
but?
yeah, right.
Oh, the but
Yes, some of
in.
his authority, but he still has to go to uh,
Oh,
Elliot.
yeah, that's great. I'm interested in that too. I think that's really interesting. This whole section is about give Joshua this authority, but don't forget that he has to present himself to Eleazar the priest, who's going to seek, yeah, that's a really interesting point too. He's not a dictator, he's a leader. And some of the leadership here means surrounding himself with advisors who will coach him, who will hopefully criticize him. No effective leader is just surrounded by a bunch of sycophantic yes men. That's always a recipe for failure in leadership also. But yet, Joshua, part of your leadership is going to be um, with the assistance and advice and counsel of Eleazar the priest. And Eleazar the priest, by the way, seeks God through the
Position of
the,
Urim.
the, the amulets of the Urim and the Tumim.
Right.
But I
Okay.
got to show you one more thing before we totally run out of time, because there's one more great comment about this, about share some of your hod with Joshua. So for this analysis, we have to go to the great 20th century Torah teacher from Jerusalem named Nechama Leibovitz. She's come up in our class a lot. Nechama Leibovitz was a towering figure in Torah interpretation in the 20th century. Her books are indispensable in any Torah library, and some of my teachers studied with her. One of the things that Nechama Leibovitz taught her students to do would be when you have something that appears twice in the text, like a story happens and then somebody retells it. Like, remember, Pharaoh had a dream and it tells us what the dream is. And then he wakes up and he tells Joseph what his dream was. Anytime a story or an event happens twice, she encourages us to outline on the page, put side by side what is similar and what is different about the descriptions. If that didn't make any sense, that's because it's visual, and I'm going to put it visually on the page for us here at the top of the source sheet. So God gives Moses instructions, and then the text tells us, and then Moses carried out the instructions. And I asked you at the beginning of class, how accurately did he carry it out? So here's a list inspired by Nehemiah Leibovitz. In verse 27, I can't put both documents up on the screen at the same time, so you have to take my word for it. In verse 27, God says, take Joshua. And then in verse 18, it said that. Then verse 22, it says, he took Joshua. Lay your hand upon him. And number 2 says, what does it say?
He laid his hands.
Oh, wait a minute. It definitely said, let's go back and see what she's pointing out to us here. It definitely said, verse 18, lay your hand upon him. Samachta yadcha alav. And then in verse 23, it says, he laid his hands in the plural upon him. Vayismoch yadav in the plural upon him. We might have missed that point if we didn't have if we didn't have Nehemiah Leibovitz to encourage us to put it. And then we might say, so what's the difference? Why did he do it with both hands when God's instruction was one hand? Got that? There's more. Stand before Eleazar the priest. He had him stand before Eleazar the priest, before the whole community, commission him in their sight, and he commissioned them. And then we have, and give him mehodcha, invest him with some of your authority. And nowhere in the subsequent Moses fulfilling the command does it say he did that. It doesn't say he gave him some of his authority. So 2 discrepancies in this list that I can tell. That God said, put your hand upon him, and Moses put both his hands upon him. And God said, give him some of your hod, and that's never mentioned again. What gives with these things? Well, I'll just point out.
What about it says to commission him before their sight, and it just says commissioned him.
Yeah, that seems to be missing also. Although, yeah, like I said, 4 times that phrase. Yeah, that seems to be missing also. I'm not sure what to do with it. But Rashi recognized the thing about the hands, and that's what this comment is at the bottom of page 2. He says that Moses is behaving very generously here. God said, put your hand upon him, and Moses, in his humility, in his modesty, or maybe in something else, put both hands, here's Rashi, with generosity, with substantially more than he had been commanded. For God said, lay your hand upon him. Moses did so with both hands. Thus, he made Joshua, he's quoting the Midrash again, Rashi, he made Joshua like a vessel that is full to its very brim, and with generosity, he filled Joshua with his wisdom. That's kind of beautiful. I'm not sure it fits everybody's characters here, but that's kind of a beautiful image that Moses, with generosity, said, I want you to succeed, Joshua. The other thing is the missing. Yeah, here's Nehemiah Leibovitz. That's what she looked like towards the end of her life. In one particular detail In the command to give his hod, his authority to Joshua, there's no equivalent. It doesn't say that Moses did this. This would seem to imply that Moses did not behave so generously. But she's quick to say, this is far from the truth. The Italian Jewish commentator Yitzhak Reggio from the 19th century, who's known by his initials as the Yashar, Yitzhak Shmuel Reggio, um, has explained this omission in this way. Invest him with some of your authority. This refers to the charisma and authority with which a ruler should be endowed. But that's not really in anybody's ability to bestow their spirit upon others. Instead, this was more of a cause and effect thing. God promised Moses that if he laid his hands upon Joshua and set him before the congregation in their sight, then God would grant Joshua some of Moses's charisma. So, do you see that? Uh, I'm sharing this with you for a couple of reasons, but one is because one reason is it teaches us to be careful, close readers of the text. Why doesn't it say he invested him with some of his authority? Because that's not in Moses' ability to do. But he reads it differently. If you do 1 through 5, then the result will be number 6. People will say he's got some of Moses's hod, his aura, his spiritual luminescence, his authority, and they'll listen to him. Now there might be other ways of reading that, but I really like the close reading says, why didn't Moses do this? Was he somehow selfish or jealous or didn't want to give this to Joshua? And the response here is no, no, no. The way of reading this is if you do 1 through 5, 6 will be the result of it. And that's the desired effect. Well, it is 1:02, but I would love to hear if anybody, I'd love to hear from you, Av, your response to this.
Just to say that the smicha is the rabbinical ordination to this day.
Yeah, and that's where they get the expression comes from. The smicha is literally putting resting hands on somebody, and the name for that rite comes from this passage in the Torah. The rabbis like to imagine that their traditions go right back, like in the first line of Pirkei Avot. Moses gave it to Joshua, Joshua gave it to the elders gave it to the prophets gave it, and they gave it to us, the rabbis. That's that's the way the rabbis like to imagine themselves. That's why they call it smicha. Yeah,
So
you're right.
also in our tradition, Moses has the highest level of nevuah of the approach to God, and no one has ever reached that level.
That's right. Since that's another great point and way of understanding some of your hod, because the end of the Torah makes very clear there was never anyone else like Moses. So if he gave all of his authority to Joshua, then there was somebody else like Moses. It can't, so it also avoids that contradiction, right? That Moses was unique, but some of what made him unique, he was able to deliver to his successor in the idea of saying, I think I think if I could sum up this passage, that we've covered a lot of ground today. I don't know if I want to sum it up, but one thing I would say about this passage is the idea is from a leader to a successor is I can't guarantee your success because you're your own person with your own skill set, with your own agenda, with your own goals and aspirations, and so on. So I can't guarantee you'll be a success, but part of being a good leader is I can give you some of the tools for success, and I can do what I can to invest in your future success. And the rest is up to you and God, and maybe Eleazar the priest. All right, we covered a lot of good ground today, and there was a really terrific midrash at the very end, which I'll give to you to read on your own on the last page. But thank you to everybody for everything, for all of your insights and comments today. I'm really pleased with what we did today, and onward. Next time we'll pick up with Numbers chapter 28. I hope you keep coming back. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Great class. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank
Good
you
to
so
see you
much,
all.
Neil.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
A lot of